මම මේ අවස්ථාව ලබා ගන්නවා අභාප්‍රතකරු වෛද්‍ය නෙවිල් ෆර්නෑන්ඩෝ මැතිතුමා පිළිබඳව පොඩි කතාවක් කියන්න. මොකද ඔහුත් සමග ළඟින් වැඩ කරපු නිසා. මම මේක ඉංග්‍රීසියෙන් කියවන්නම්. මම මේක ලිපියක් හැටියට ගරු කතානායකතුමා පළ කරා. නමුත් මම කැමතියි මේක හැන්ඩ්සාට් ගත කරන්න. Once Dr. Neville Fernando wrote me an email wishing for my death by lightning. The next day he sent me another apologizing for what he had said in a fit of anger. He was angry and he was upset. He had founded the South Asian Institute for Technology and Medicine, SITEM, to provide opportunities for local students to obtain medical degrees for a fee. He had got all approvals and SITEM had been provided, quote, degree awarding status, unquote. But with the first batch passing out with their MBBS degrees, the whole structure had begun to crumble. The young graduates were not being recognized by the regulator, even though the court had directed otherwise. There was massive opposition from certain sections of society and politically motivated trade unions. They wanted SITEM shut. The rallying cry was Dr. Fernando was providing low-quality medical graduates and profiting from selling medical degrees. The Government Medical Officers Association, the GMOA, had crippled the country with days of total shutdown of the health sector. Teaching at medical faculties of state universities had been halted for months, sir. Dr. Fernando's anger towards me was understandable. I was in the middle of negotiating a settlement, having been appointed to chair the Presidential Committee to resolve the SITEM issue. He was not happy with what was going on. Dr. Fernando was adamant that SITEM should be allowed to continue. He had already built the Neville Fernando Teaching Hospital for clinical training requirements when the GMOA scuttled his already approved plan to train them at select government hospitals. Before I met him during the SITEM issue, I had only heard of the legend, that good doctor who had a thriving practice in Panadura but gave it up to enter parliament in 1977, beating Leslie Gunawardena. The strong UNP man opposed leader Jaya Jayawardena on matters of principle and walked away from his party. That entrepreneur who created JFNI, Royal Fernwood, Harsha Central and perhaps others that I am not aware of, he was a hero to anyone starting out on one zone. I decided to write this appreciation then, and I decided to speak it out here today for the Hansard of Dr. Fernando, who passed away recently, because I want people of this country to know how vested interests shut the door on what he attempted to do for them. My association with Dr. Fernando took place during the last phase of the SITEM issue. President Maithripala Sirisena had just appointed the chairman of the Presidential Committee to resolve issues related to SITEM in late August 2017. At the time, I was Deputy Minister of National Policies and Economic Affairs. My committee consisted of DC Disanayaka, Secretary Ministry of Higher Education, Janaka Sugata Dasa, Secretary Ministry of Health, Honorable Jayanta Jayasuriya, Attorney General. He was represented by Sanjay Radratnam, Additional Solicitor General, who is the former is now the Chief Justice, the latter is now the Attorney General, and Professor Mohan De Silva, Chairman, University Grants Commission. The committee met on 5 occasions and deliberated at length. We, in some cases, me and several members, also met with other stakeholders. Dr. Fernando came to the meetings with his granddaughter Himali Jayatilaka, who he was very comfortable with. A finance professional, she was deputy chairperson of SITEM. We met academics and key administrative staff of SITEM. We met representatives of the Sri Lanka Medical Council, SLMC. We met with academics and decision makers of almost all state university medical faculties, including their deans. We met with the representatives of the Association of Medical Specialists, AIMS. Even though the GMA was unable to meet us on 2 agreed appointments, I had already met with the office bearers separately, along with the Higher Education Minister Lakshman Kiriyala. I had also met with representatives from the Federation of Faculty of Medicine Teachers Association. None of the meetings was easy. At a personal level, I learned a lot to negotiate, sir. After much deliberation and serious give and take with stakeholders, and with in-principle agreement with SLMC representatives and Dr. Neville Fernando, my committee submitted a report to the President in mid-September 2017. We proposed a compromise solution that would be equitable to all stakeholders and no financial burden to the government. It kept alive the government policy of high quality, non-state and not-for-profit medical education. It was also financially viable almost immediately and sustainable in the long run. The solution in essence was to change the shareholding and management structure of SITEM and convert the for-profit Fernando family-owned SITEM into a not-for-profit institution with a broad-based ownership structure. So technically, SITEM would cease to exist over a period of time. We call it a sunset, sir. But a new entity would be established conforming to the minimum standards of medical education and training with improved governance over a specified period of time. We call it a sunrise. We strongly urge to expedite the establishment of the proposed Independent Quality Assurance and Accreditation Authority, IQAAA, to determine quality assurance and accreditation of all degrees, state and non-state, including those that require professional recognition to practice. For medical degree programs, the SLMC was to be the statutory body which would work with collaboration with the IQAAA. This was a major breakthrough. The strikes ended and the students agreed to get back to lectures. I recall that evening my visit to the Dental Institute at Ward Place. Hundreds of medical students and their parents were protesting outside the premises. A couple of police officers escorted me inside and I sat with about 50 students in a hall upstairs and explained what we had come up with. I remember that discussion vividly. Not everyone was in agreement, but the more moderate protesters were willing to listen. That day, I spoke about how the world over fee-levying yet not-for-profit non-state universities were working in tandem with state universities. We looked at the list of some of the world's top medical schools: Harvard, Stanford, Johns Hopkins, Yale. They were all private not-for-profit institutions run mainly by investment income from their endowments. There were others around the world. I said we could also think of such models where perhaps one top quality university could be created with the endowment of funds, and how what Dr. Fernando started should not be dismissed. After all, Dr. Fernando had agreed to sacrifice in financial terms because he wanted his venture to succeed in whichever way possible. In late October, President Sirisena issued a communique explaining the proposed solution and appointed a second presidential committee tasked with implementing the recommendations on the report we had submitted. Again, I chaired this committee that includes secretaries to the Ministry of Health and Higher Education, the SLMC President, the UGC Chairman, Vice Chancellors of Universities of Colombo and Jawadanapura, the medical faculty deans of Universities of Colombo and Kelaniya. In addition, the President also appointed as observers AMS, SLMA, GMOA, FFMTA, that is the Federation of Teachers, Government Medical Students Parents Association, and SITEM Medical Students Parents Association. The committee had 3 long sessions to debate and improve the original solution. It was not easy, as the diverse views of the observers had to be taken into consideration. In the meantime, we started discussions with the Sri Lanka Institute of Information Technology, SLIIT, which expressed serious interest in coming on board. SLIIT had a very good reputation of having started small to become a highly respected, fee-levying, non-state institution of higher education, offering degree courses in IT, sciences, business, engineering, and so on. While all this was happening, Dr. Fernando was getting edgy, to put it mildly. A directive had gone out from the Higher Education Ministry stopping admissions to SITEM, and that was causing cash flow problems. We were now entering a rather intricate phase. We had to ensure 900 innocent students' futures were not disrupted while resolving the complex financial and legal issues, not just with SITEM, but also with the Neville Fernando Teaching Hospital, which ran into several billion rupees in bank facilities. I recall with gratitude the participation of the CEO and top management of Bank of Ceylon, including the personal involvement of Mr. Ranil Vijay Singh, at the time director of the bank, to arrive at an innovative mechanism to implement the multifaceted program. After several sessions with the lawyers, FJ and G. Desaram, led by partner Ayumi Aluvihare, with the technical advisors, Mr. Thilan Vijay and Mr. Nirosh De Silva, who voluntarily contributed to restructure the transaction, along with Professor Lakshman Ratnayaka and Professor Lalit Gamage of SLIIT, the committee was finally able to arrive at the final memorandum of understanding that Dr. Fernando was willing to sign. I had multiple conversations with Dr. Fernando over several weeks we took to arrive at this MOU. He was not a willing participant. Saitam was his dream. He had invested billions to establish Saitam and NFTH. He was responsible for 900 young lives. But for reasons that would perhaps someday will be known, those who didn't oppose beyond a whimper Dr. Fernando when he established Saitam in 2008, nor when it received degree awarding status in 2013, came out in full force to oppose the same when Dr. Fernando from 2015. To the independent observer, the ugly politics of this whole episode was more than obvious. But he knew he had to make a choice. Was he going to agree to the new model where he would give up control, or was he going to fight the solution? I understood his agony and disappointment. For him, to wish my death by lightning was, however, unintended. It's not much longer, sir. After several days of studying the draft and revisions, he told me he was ready to sign. The MOU spelled out the solution to establish the sunset and sunrise institutions with the approval of SLMC on minimum standards. SLIIT was in agreement to establish the two institutions after taking over all the assets and liabilities of Saitam along with its entire medical program. It was willing to make a significant investment. The NFTH was to be legally transferred to the government with the undertaking to offer clinical training for students. All financial facilities were to be restructured and an agreed upon nominal amount would be paid to shareholders of Saitam. All this was fine, but Dr. Fernando insisted that we include in the preamble the following sentence, quote, whereas Saitam and the shareholders represent that Saitam was established with a significant initial capital investment and it had not declared dividends or distributed profits to its shareholders since its establishment, but has offered approximately 600 million rupees in scholarships to students, unquote. He wanted it because anti-Saitam groups accused him of profiting from it. Now that he is no more, it is important to note the truth that Dr. Fernando had never profited from Saitam. In fact, he poured billions of his own and borrowed money to build and run Saitam and NFTH. The day he was to sign the MOU, he refused. He didn't give a reason. But the next morning he called me. I recall it was early and it was the weekend. He told me, quote, Harsha, you better sign the damn thing first. It's your idea. Once you and Kirialla sign, I will sign, close quotes. And finally, it materialized. And Mr. Kirialla signed for the government. Professor Ratnayak and Gamage signed on behalf of the SLIIT. All shareholders of Saitam signed. I don't know exactly how Dr. Fernando got the rest of his family to agree, but all 7 shareholders did sign the document. And so we had a win-win. The due diligence started and the lawyers and bankers were finalizing the details. Dr. Fernando was being very difficult, but he was still going along with the decision to let go of his prized possession for the good of Sri Lanka. Non-state, not-for-profit medical education was to be established where many would benefit. A large scholarship program was structured as part of the solution where money would not have been a barrier to entry. And then it happened. Excreta hit the rotating blades, as they say. It was a late afternoon in February 2018. I got a call from Defense Ministry Secretary Kapila Vaidyaratna. He said he was at the Presidential Secretariat and needed to speak with me urgently. So I asked him to come over to my office at the WTC. Then he broke the news. The President had decided to direct General Sir John Kotalawala Defence University to take over all activities and students of Saitam. And Mr. Vaidyaratna was asked to implement it. Subsequently, I found that certain people who were unhappy with the proposed plan to keep non-state, not-for-profit medical education alive had convinced President Sirisena to U-turn what he had earlier agreed upon. He had no consultation with me nor my committee. So ended the Saitam saga and the free-living medical education in Sri Lanka just like that. Dr. Neville Fernando, sir, was a maverick. He contributed much to this nation. My hope is that someday who killed his restructured dream would realize that they were wrong and would start from where it stopped. I would be happy to offer my services to make it happen. May Dr. Neville Fernando attain the supreme bliss of nirvana. So I mention this because this country needs to know. Now today people are talking about non-state, not-for-profit education. Look at what's happening in this country. Dr. Neville Fernando was right from the beginning. His intention was not to create a profit-making institute. He agreed, he signed, everybody agreed. Right now, since there is almost agreement on both sides of the aisle, I think we need to restart what he started. And there is an opportunity to perhaps go back to this solution and in the benefit of the generations to come, that we carry on what he started. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.